Let's jump into this first story, man. It's the last show of the year, so we're going to talk about Kari Lake. And I was watching this trial all day. I got to pull up this story from Fox News because this is just it's absolutely insane. Fox News publishes this story. Kari Lake's opening salvo in election fraud case appears to fall short. It's not a fraud case. Kari Lake's trial right now is about invalid ballots. Lake's fraud allegations didn't appear to explain her 17,000 vote loss to Katie Hobbs. She did not make a fraud allegation. They explicitly said they are not making a fraud allegation. It's crazy to me, not so surprising, when even Fox News is not telling the story correctly. So I'll give you the gist of what we saw yesterday and where we're at today. So yesterday, what do we hear? One witness testified that he was given a sample of certain ballots, and he found that in all of the samplings, there were 19-inch images printed on 20-inch paper, which we know from both the defense and the plaintiff the machines would reject that. He then testified the ballots were then duplicated, but the originals were not stored along with them, breaking chain of custody. And that's the one that's crazy to me. Like, is anybody talking about that? Like, if you fill out a ballot and they told you to put it in box 3, and you did, because it didn't count, they would duplicate it and run the duplicate through the machine, and then they lost the original. So how do we compare these two and know they're actually the same? That should have been brought up. We then heard from one witness that 298,000 ballots had no chain of custody. This one's simple. The judge should have just said to the defense, can you produce the chain of custody document in question? They didn't have it. They didn't produce it. I don't understand how we're at this point. Today, we heard from the People's Pundit, Richard Barris. He said that exit polling returns for Election Day were substantially lower than anything he's ever seen ever. I think he said something like 72% when he normally looks for around 95 to 98% returns. And he believes this is because people were not able to vote, so thus they did not come back. Now, this was challenged, but he basically said due to the errors, they talked to voters. Voters said that there were long lines and there were tabulation machine problems. And because of that, he believes people did experience issues, people reported issues, and thus a substantial amount of voters were disenfranchised. They argued against this today, but I think it's particularly compelling. But keep in mind, it's not definitive proof, it's circumstantial evidence. Ultimately, what we end up getting in the closing arguments, and this was really good for the defense. They said it, Your Honor, you instructed in your ruling that the plaintiff would have to prove intentional misconduct with the intent to basically subvert the election or flip it in another direction. And they have not proven that. That's important because the judge is going to be like, you're right. You can't prove an individual acted intentionally in an effort to hurt Kari Lake. Therefore, even if the ballots are invalid or otherwise, doesn't matter.
That makes no sense to me because if I trip and fall and accidentally subvert an election, that election got subverted. So it would be no good. You'd have to do a new one. It doesn't matter what my intentions were.
But I guess as per the law, the judge ruled if you can prove that someone intentionally acted to alter the outcome of the election, then they would be that was the stipulation for what they needed to win. And it appears the only evidence they presented was that, yes, at I think it was like six locations they tested, they found the ballot tabulators were misconfigured. The only way the misconfiguration could happen is if someone intentionally altered the printer settings. It was not an accident. And then the defense contends, okay, and even if someone intentionally did that, you can't prove the person who did it to hurt Kari Lake, therefore we win.
Oh, that is a leap. If you intentionally do something that subverts an election, that doesn't matter if it was about Kari is not even. It doesn't make sense. If they intentionally changed it to a 19-inch ballot, then that was intent. And
Blake, what do you make of this court hearing? What's your assessment on what you're seeing?
Well, I think the standard that the judge is requiring is even higher, right? It's actually Kari's team had to show intent plus a different result. Right?
They had to show...
You had to intend, and the result would have been different but for all of these changes.
A tangible
that's really
number.
hard to prove. Like, we'll see what the judge rules tomorrow, right? But what's indisputable is that Kari and her legal team have shown, they've just put out in front of everybody, all these, called them, whether it's mistakes or active malfeasance, the election was really messed up. It was really messed up. Like, people went to go vote on election day and the machines didn't work. Well, the printers did not work. How does that happen?
I think
third world is what
one
it
of the
is.
witnesses said 132 voting locations. There were issues.
Yeah, it's like 30% of the voting locations.
Yeah.
Which is really crazy. I think, and Abe Hamadeh, the attorney general, right? His election was certified as a loss by like 500 votes. And I know he's in litigation too, and they're doing a recount, but 500 votes. And everybody of good conscience knows. And we sued on election day to try to get the polls to stay open for a couple more hours. That was rejected. Had the polls stayed open one more hour, Abe would be going into his recount probably up a few thousand votes, because those votes on election day were breaking heavily for Republicans. So Abe's was super close, and I think that obviously swung it. Kari's at 17,000. I think she has a good claim that, like, hey, if the printers worked and people could actually vote when they showed up, that she'd be the governor of Arizona.
Let's argue, for the sake of argument, let's say the voter tabulation problems and all that didn't exist. A witness testified that 298,000 ballots had no chain of custody. How can you verify where those ballots come from? And then you actually, I'm pretty sure the defense's own witness, I'm not sure if it was Jarrett, testified like, well, yeah, we didn't track that, but by law they have to. So, okay, hold on there a minute. If I was a judge and someone came to me and said the margin 17,000 and these 298,000 have no chain of custody, I'd say, well, okay, that's against the law, new election, end of story.
I bet the judge won't do that because the law doesn't say, hey, new election, right? And I think we need to change the state law. I think the state legislature should say, hey, if you can't prove chain of custody, you can't assume that's a fair election. But it appears that the burden of proof right now is on the Kari Lake team. The judge is going to say, well, hey, okay, chain of custody, that was broken. That's technically a violation of the law, but what's the remedy, right? You haven't shown me that they injected new ballots, and it's probably impossible to prove. Maybe it didn't happen, right?
What happens to this state if the judge comes out and says, yeah, you know, it's against the law to not have chain of custody, but too bad. I mean, what are the people? I have to imagine half of this state, and not, let alone how the elections impact the rest of the country. But I mean, if I lived here and I was a voter, and I was told in the press by the judge and by everyone, these ballots have no chain of custody, so we can't verify them, but we're going to count them anyway. How could I have faith in that system?
It'd be really hard to. And that's unfortunate, right? Like, whether Republicans win or not, like, I want everybody to know that their vote counted. I want everyone to know that we have a first world election system. And the truth is that as soon as you criticize our elections, people call you an election denier, right? Well, we have better elections than some countries, and we have worse elections than almost every Western democracy, right? And the truth is somewhere in the middle. And apparently what we're learning in Maricopa is you can botch an election. You can just botch it. And if no one can prove that you did it with the purpose of putting your thumb on the scale and that it actually mathematically changed the result, you can get away with it.
How about this? It was Maricopa County testified. I believe it was Maricopa County. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Double check all this. I'm watching the trial, and there's a lot that has to be parsed through. But they initially testified that 19-inch ballots could not appear on 20-inch paper. Then, when the plaintiff's witness came up and said, actually, yeah, we have it, and they published images of this, they come back today and go, oh, actually, we knew about that problem. It affected 3 other elections. And it's like, ooh, hold on. And he's like, now we're doing a root cause analysis of that. So, but you said the other day it couldn't happen. Now you're saying, oh, yeah, we knew about that. Okay, so you knew that was a problem. It's been a problem. You didn't fix it. To me, it's insane that what we're basically hearing is the election was improperly done in 2 ways. The ballot tabulators were improperly configured. They knew it was improperly configured. They're trying to figure out how. And there was lost chain of custody on these ballots. And they would just be like, yeah, well, you know. The crazy thing to me is this is the will of the people, the utmost importance for our nation, for each state, for each jurisdiction, to know that we are governed with the consent of the people, but that they would come out and the judge would be like, yeah, these call into question the integrity of the election, but we're going to roll with it anyway. I mean, I think people are going to lose their minds if that ends up being the ruling.
And I'll tell you, there's already a lot of appetite for more election integrity in Arizona, right? It's Kari's whole platform was, I'm going to go in and clean this up. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, I'm going to bring more transparency to the system, right? We're going to reform all this stuff. And now if we don't get that opportunity, my heart breaks for the people in Arizona. It's like, why would anyone trust it?
So, Blake, you ran for the Senate. You did not win. What's different about your election? How did it go? You know, what was your experience?
The margin is different. You know, I think I lost by about 125,000 votes was the official difference between Mark Kelly and me. And, you know, I think I drew a tougher opponent, and he's an astronaut, and man, he nuked me with like $30 or $40 million, right? And we thought about suing and was this the right thing to do? And ultimately, with all our analysis, like, no, it wasn't, because as messed up as this election in Maricopa was, you can't make up 125,000 votes. Like, I don't think I won the election, right? And I have to have enough integrity to say that. I can't sell false hope to my people. Like I said, Abe Hamadeh, 500 votes. This stuff in Maricopa County absolutely swung 500 votes. Now, Kari has the interesting in between, right? 17,000. And I guess that's what her trial was. And she's trying to prove that but for this incompetence, call it incompetence at best, malfeasance at worst, but for this incompetence, I would have won 17,000 votes. We'll see.
Let's hammer that one down. Let's say that Kari Lake's initial argument was, I understand that it was one big misunderstanding by everybody. Nobody intended to do this improperly, but clearly we can see that the vote margin could be different if not for all these tabulators being wrong. The law could not remedy that.
That's right.
The law requires intent.
It requires intent, and could be different. It was different. It would have been different. And that's a really hard bar. It's a really hard bar.
Also, but that's insane. That's not real governance. Real governance is saying, okay, what do we know? And let's apply remedy on the facts. They're saying, regardless of the facts, there's a high standard that must be met, meaning the system in place right now would actually put a person in power who didn't win, I'm saying hypothetically, just because the standard is too high to change it.
I think it's insane, because if I were to do something like destroy someone's property, but I didn't do it to hurt them, that wasn't my intention. My intention was just like, oh, I didn't have an intention. I just accidentally destroyed your house, but I didn't intend to hurt you.
No crime.
Yeah, apparently when it comes to you apply that to the political landscape, it's not a crime. That makes no sense. I mean, intention is irrelevant when you're talking about disrupting and destroying things.
Well, like if you kill someone,
you're right, somewhat.
If somebody dies and there's no intent, it's manslaughter. It's like if you're reckless or whatever. If you intend to do it, now it's murder.
But it's still a crime. It is still a crime.
So potentially, you could be driving in your car and you could hit somebody and it could be totally accidental and you don't go to jail for it. So the difference here is that person still lost their life. We still acknowledge they lost their life. You may be still held liable civilly. We're talking about an end process where one person will be the executive in government, meaning there is a very simple remedy. If we can see that something lacks integrity in the election, we hold a new election, because we're trying to get the will of the people done right. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.